Okay, you guys all have the text I sent you. So summary of where we're up to, and then we'll continue. What we're talking about is the description of the mission at the end of the tractate Taanit, Taanit, about the maidens going out to the vineyards of Yerushalayim on the 15th of Av for the purposes of Shidduchim. And they went out in white borrowed clothing. So first the Rabbi explained spiritually, of course, based on the principle, the foundational principle that our relationship with Hashem is akin to a marriage. In fact, it's the other way around. It's because of our relationship with Hashem, that's why there's marriage on earth. It's a reflection of our relationship with Hashem. Marriage is not a good idea. No, it's a godly idea, but not a good idea. The whole notion of two people being forever, not a logical thing. A partnership works for as long as it works. Forever are brothers and sisters, a family that have this natural kinship, but a stranger forever. Friends can work forever because you're not, that intimately bound up with each other, but have to share everything and share yourself. First of all, the whole notion to share yourself with somebody else is unnatural. The human condition is selfish, and marriage is all about service. Once in a while, you can do that. But this is 24/7 for the rest of your life. It's the most contrary thing to human nature possible. Most contrary. So it's not a good idea. It's a godly idea. It's a godly idea, which is why, of course, before I address this a little bit further, why marriage is a big challenge, and most of them don't work. If it's because it's not going to be based on the godliness of it, then how could it work? Why should it work? At best, they will just make peace with it because it's kids and it's just so many other considerations. So they just stay together. And that often happens even in marriages that don't divorce. They turn into some kind of, working relationship. They've made peace with the fact that they're stuck with each other, even though they could separate, but it's just, too complicated. And, they're going to find somebody better. So whatever, they just stick it out. That's not the way a marriage should be. It should really be the most empowering and relationship that's forever flourishing and deepening. And that's only possible if it's based on godliness and holiness. In other words, if it's a soul connection, if it's a connection that nurtures the soul and is rooted in the soul, namely a reflection of the fact that they were two halves of one soul, then it's going to work. And that's precisely our relationship with Hashem. Before the soul came down to the world, it's one with Hashem. Separates, and we're going to reconnect. That's marriage. Souls were one, separate into different bodies, genders, backgrounds, etc., and then become one. But to achieve that oneness is only possible if we transcend all of the separation components and draw on this godly source and essence, which is where we are one. That's how it's going to work, not just functionally, but in a very deep way, in such a deep way that the oneness we achieve down here, husband and wife, is even deeper, far deeper and richer than the oneness they had as souls, kindred souls in heaven. Deeper than that, because that didn't draw on their essence. We're not going to that right now. The essence of the connection is connected to down here. It's exactly with Hashem, the same thing. The soul in heaven is connected to Hashem's rays, revelation, manifestation, and it's glorious and wonderful, and there's no challenge, and it's enjoyable. There's nothing else to do anyway. But down here in the body, when we connect, that reveals the yechidah, the essence of the soul, that is far beyond the connection the soul enjoys with Hashem in heaven. It's exactly the same model. So I'm saying the reason there is marriage down here is because it's a reflection of the relationship between every Jew and Hashem. The sanctity of marriage is a Jewish idea, a Torah idea, which the world is trying to emulate and struggling with. And the solution, the answer is in Torah. So This whole story here, the young girls going out, obviously at the deeper level, the origin of it all is Neshamas and Hashem. Without repeating last week's shir, the 15th above comes after what appears to be the end of the relationship. The house is destroyed, Tisha B'Av, and husband and wife are estranged. But as we read in this week's Haftarah, Hashem says, show me the bill of divorce. Did I divorce you? Can I divorce you? Would I divorce you? Never. So we're estranged, but not got separated externally, but not, God forbid, cut off. The word get implies get kisses, severed, never severed. So now the 15th of Av is reconnecting to Hashem on an ever deeper level. That's the nature of marriage as well. It's not going to be smooth sailing. There's going to be separation. There's going to be hurt. Because we're so close, small things can really be painful. And other relationships are just marginal, but in a marriage, how could you have said that? How could you have done that? They're deeply painful. And there's going to be that. And even if there isn't, there is mikveh, which is separation and coming together, which gives reflection and expression to the fact, I'm adding a new dimension to all of this, but on an external level, we're strangers. We could divorce. We're not related to each other, and yet we achieve the greatest oneness. Marriage is an ongoing miracle, really, an ongoing relationship of kiddushin that brings strangers externally to achieve the deepest oneness by drawing on their essential bond. It's huge work to touch that essence level. In heaven, they don't touch it. It's only here. Only here. So, but it requires constant work. So if I said this last week, I did, but I'll add this. It's a famous, it's a beautiful teaching. It's worth revisiting it. If I have mentioned it earlier here, I don't think you heard it, so I'll share it for your benefit. Particularly since it's so relevant to you. It's relevant to all of us because as you're going to hear now, marriage is an ongoing process. To explain, this is a big chiddush of the Rogatchover, the famous Rabbi Yosef Rosen, who was one of the most outstanding scholars in Jewish history, certainly in recent history. He's of the very few achronim, which means latter-day scholars. Shouldn't use that term. Achronim, that the Rebbe talks about and bases his sikhs on, sometimes differing, but often quoting. There are a few recent scholars that would earn that kind of respect. Shoinim, Rambam, Rashi, of course, but as the Baal Shem Tov said, Baal Shem Tov taught, it's in Ayoim Yoim, that till the Marsha, Rabbi Shlomo Ideres, some 400 years ago, or less, all the Torah scholars were divinely inspired, the ones that were accepted by jury. After that, unnecessarily, could be yes, could be not. And certainly in recent times, you can write a book and it doesn't mean it's divinely inspired, and it's not divinely inspired, it's interpretation. We don't want to read interpretation, we want to read revelation. So there's a few scholars that meet that. The Rebbes do, the Hasidic Rebbes, the true Hasidic Rebbes, of course, do, but just being a big genius and Rosh Hashiva and going and writing a sefer and a chiddush, it could be on, it could be off. And the yardstick is bittul. The more bittul, the more on. The less bittul, the more off. So if you're a godel, and that's your aspiration, it's very suspect, to put it mildly. I'm being very raw, but that's the truth. So I'm just saying that Rogatchover, this great Gaon, contemporary scholar, 100 years ago, less, is someone that I've quoted frequently. He was an outstanding luminary. At any rate, so here's the chiddush that he says. It's a very big chiddush, and it is this. We use the term Kenyan, which means acquisition when it comes to marriage. It's the term the Torah uses. And a man acquires a wife. Now, that doesn't mean, God forbid, that we're comparing this to the acquisition of some article, but the term is used. And that's why money is a means by which value you give a ring. That's one of the ways to be mekadesh, to betroth a woman, which / acquire. Now, without going into what acquire means now, Kenyan, which is actually a reference to Elam Atzilus, but that's not for now.
The chiddush of the Rogatchover is that every other acquisition happens once and it's done with. You acquire something, it's yours. And that's the end of it. It belongs to you. There's no need to further manifest your ownership over it. Once it's done, it's yours. Someone wants to take it from you, that's theft. You can sell it if you wish, right? But it's yours. That's logical. You acquire something, and there's a means by which you do that. You have to raise it, you have to lift it, what depending is, you have to manifest physical acquisition in halakha. If it's a field, you've got to till it. If it's an object, you've got to lift it. Or if it's an animal, you've got to draw it. If it's a ship, everything has its ways. Once done, the Kenyan, is active acquisition, it's done. The chiddush of the Rogatchover is that marriage is not so. Every moment is this act of union, of betrothal. Every single moment, till the dying day, may they live a long, healthy, productive life, or till they divorce. It's every second. And it has huge halachic ramifications. Huge halachic ramifications. But the spiritual underpinning, he spoke in terms of halacha, is because this whole union is unnatural. It needs a constant divine, like creation is ongoing every second. Because it's unnatural. There shouldn't be creation. There's only God and nothing else. There's also something else. That something else fundamentally has no place. Hashem has to constantly will it into being. When he doesn't, things will revert back to the natural state. And that's God alone. So just like creation is ongoing, because fundamentally there's no intrinsic possibility even anything other than Hashem can only exist because he wills it to. And even then, it's not really other. It's only the consequence of his will. That's the truth of what creation is. So marriage is the same way, that these two people, strangers, become one, and 1 + 1 = 1 is illogical. So it needs a constant divine force to constantly bring them together. It's ongoing. Strangers becoming together, strangers becoming one, strangers becoming one. So mikveh feeds that. That's the truth of marriage. Marriage is strangers achieving the ultimate unity. What I'm telling you is that usually when you talk about mikveh, say, well, why mikveh? It's imposition on married life, on intimacy. It's many levels of answers, but the most common and true answer, an appealing answer generally is, it's worth it. Because anything that is constantly available loses its appeal. Yes means nothing if there's never a no. Yes doesn't mean anything. It just is. Like yes, it is. Yes means yes. When it could be no, there is a no. Anything in life, you have a delicious supper. You have it every night. After a few nights, you'll recoil after whatever. It could take you a week or a year, but at some point, look at it. That's human nature. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. So that's the general explanation for mikveh. It's worth it because every month it's a honeymoon, and it's true. This is true. Couples that keep mikveh, it's a different relationship altogether and sustains them. Even after the cycle, she goes beyond menopause, it's so foundational, the appreciation, not taking for granted the physical touch of being together, because for the better part of their life, or at least the early decades, there was this constant separation. It sustains. And it's always like, wow, we can hand something to each other. That's amazing. The touch, grazing your finger is like, wow. Well, that's true. But it's an imposition. It's an imposition, but it's worth it because of the benefit of the union together. But the deeper reason is, it's not an imposition. It's actually reflective of what your relationship is. You are strangers becoming together. You are strangers achieving the ultimate union. It's kedushin is an ongoing process. You follow? And the fact is, you're strangers. You could separate in an instant and become absolute strangers. And if you forget you're strangers, invite the in-laws. And you'll remember how different you are. Husband and wife shouldn't be friends. They're also friends, but friends is a platonic relationship. You're much more than friends. It's fire, it's passion, it's strangers becoming one. And mikveh nurtures, it gives expression in a very healthy, beautiful way to this truth of the ongoing nature of marriage, separate and becoming one. Strangers achieving the ultimate union. And that's why it's compared to fire. Ish to Isha. Husband is called Ish, Isha is wife. The root letters are Ish, fire. How is the fire produced?
First of all, many symbolism here. The two flames become one. It's inseparable. Ultimate union. And fire, passion. Fire reaches out. You're reaching out to each other constantly. You're overcoming the distance which externally exists to achieve the essential bond. Following. And also, this is critical, the fire is produced only when the oil or the fuel is consumed. That's the ego, the separation, external separation, the ego, the I, the me. Life revolves around me. It's got to be burnt, consumed, and then you can become one. That's constant work to fuel that. It's again explaining why marriage is an ongoing process. The Rogatchover, the big chiddush, the halakhic chiddush, it's an ongoing, as if you're marrying every second. You could say to a couple any moment, Mazel Tov. Why? Because every second you're getting married. Every second, for the fire to endure, the fuel has to be there being consumed. Remove the fuel consumption, it's the end of the fire. It's constant. It's all of these layers to this truth. So what did we learn last week? So last week, the Rabbi explained the significance of the borrowed white clothing. That they're going out in white clothing. So the meaning, just in summary, which we now have deep understanding because of our discussion this morning, the white, which is colorless, color is descriptive. White is not descriptive. White, it's the absence of colors. It's not anything else. Black is also, but that's in the other extreme. So white represents the essence of the neshama. They're going out in borrowed white clothing. Our point is to reconnect to each other and draw on the soul essence that's hidden in the colored dimensions of the soul. What's the color? Intellect, emotion. There are 7 colors, but there are 7 emotions. The colors are also reflected in intellect because there's also 7 components to intellect. We're not going to this now. That's why the head tefillin has 7 heads, 3 and then 4. Yeah. Okay, we'll leave that now. Generally, it's Chabad, it's 3, but it's in detail, it's 7 components. That's colors, the descriptive. That's the ego, the self, my mind, my heart, my feelings. White, soul essence. So they're going out in white clothing because now they're reconnecting after Tisha B'Av, which was the distance, the separation. The Shomesh Yisrael are reconnecting to Hashem in the white clothing, unlocking ever deeper now the Chida, the soul essence, which is really the core of where we are one, deeper than the soul in heaven. That's a colorful connection. Beautiful in heaven, we understand, we feel, that's why we call it heaven. It's pleasurable, enjoyable. There's no challenge there, so it works. But down here, to have, I married you because I enjoy and like you and all of these ego things, someone else does it better. It's like, I'll not hold you. And you've got to draw on the essence where we are one beyond the appreciation and gain agenda, essentially one. That's the white. You're following? Just to be clear. In heaven, we're one on an experiential. I don't mean as experiment. I mean as in experience level. Down here, we're separate. We've got to connect and draw not on the heavenly connection, but the essence connection. The same is true of Hashem. The same model exactly. All purpose of the soul coming down to the world. So that requires sacrifice and devotion, etc. That's what expresses that white level is egolessness. Question?
If every Jew that we meet has the same essence level of Hashem, the same Jewish soul, which is come from the essence, how do you know that that's your counterpart?
A very good question. Very good question. Okay. The answer is that the operative word is relative. There's essential essence and there's a relative essence. So it's all relative. It's not a cop-out because of Hashem is one, all these manifestations, all the levels we speak about and repeat endlessly of different models. That one is the truth is in every model as we descend down Ishtalshalos. So there's essence and there's relative essence. It's all relative, all relative. So I just want to say one more thing. that the reason why Yom Kippur is the other day is very important since you bring this up. Why Yom Kippur is the day for young man and woman to meet, because Kippur, the last day of the year that they should be dating is Yom Kippur. No, it's the day, because what better day to find your soulmate than the day when your soul is revealed? Likewise, the 15th of Av, which is all about, we're going to rebuild this shattered house, the base image is destroyed. We've got to go to the core essence of devotion and sacrifice to rebuild the destruction of all the external levels that were destroyed, the pain and the hurt. All to say, how do you find your soulmate? Here's the best recipe. The more you reveal your soul, the more your soul is pumping up, the easier it'll attract and see that soulmate in the other. So if you're going out for a good time, it ain't gonna work. You may not. If you end up under the chuppah, then you're meant to be, despite yourself. You're still meant to be. It's despite yourself. You have to work to really to make that a soul connection. But if you're going out just to begin with, it's on the one hand, when you go out, it's got to be selfish. Beginning, why this person is somebody else. But underlying all of that, there's got to be this honesty, this soulful honesty, and to see the soul in the other, and to express your own soul. And it doesn't take long for that to click. If we're both honest and soulful, then either we feel this connection, it's there, or it's not. It doesn't take long. In one day, Yom Kippur was over. Such a soulful day, they connected immediately. Life was less complicated in those days, so we can't do this in 5 minutes at a vineyard in Jerusalem. We got a date, and as time goes on, I see the dating process getting more and more elaborate because we're just less soulful, but the principle remains the same. The simpler, the more soulful, the more direct, the more easy it is. Things are changing. In my day, my friends and I went out 4 times for an hour, 2, 3, that was it. Yes or no? And usually it was the first girl. Why not? Because life is simpler, but there's bracha, you went and just boom. Life isn't that simple today. You got to find the girl, and you go date many times, etc. But the principle remains still. The more soulful, the more direct it's going to be. Soulful, honest. Yeah.
The more soul to soul direct your interaction is, and it's like less distraction of activity and food, whatever. It's that.
100%. Yeah. Okay. So that's the 15th of Av. So that is the white clothing. Now the borrowed white clothing, which is what we're getting to. The borrowed, we explained last week. Why is it borrowed? Because the Yechida level is like borrowed to the soul's manifested ego levels. We don't operate consciously on the Yechida level. It's selfless. It's only expressed through Kabbalah oil, through sacrifice. So it's borrowed in that sense. It's not the natural state. Our natural state, we operate on mind and heart, on what makes sense, what feels good, what doesn't. We're wrapped up in self, and that's how God designed and created us. We have to borrow, draw, and reach beyond ourselves. That's our Veda. To borrow is on a simple level. When you borrow, it's humbling. Can I please have what you've got? I don't have it. I don't have it. It's bittul. There's a bittul there. It's in the borrowing from our soul essence that is which is a constant avodah and a constant recognition that this is beyond my conscious self. It's my deeper self, but totally beyond my conscious self, which is selfish and inescapably so. I have to constantly borrow on it. And how do you borrow on this? Through Kabbalah oil, and through avodah, and through going beyond self in the course of the marriage, borrowing the white garment level, which is the selfless Yechida level, where the soul is one with Hashem. Now, what we're up to now is what we talked about yesterday in Shul. And that is the machlokes between Bavli and Yerushalmi, how they borrowed. Did they borrow up or they borrowed down? Let's revisit this now and explain it, and it's very beautiful. And I thought we'd have time to also connect it to yesterday's discussion about Chof of. Okay, so listen, we'll do that next week if we have to. We got time. Hashem should give us time. We have time. Right? You have to finish something. Oh, sorry. So you all have the text. I sent it to you. Yeah. It's page 337, third paragraph. You got it there?
Yeah.
In the order of borrowing, there's an argument between the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud. Shittas Bavli, the Gemara says like this. This is the Gemara in Masechta Taanit. Note how it was borrowed. Bas Melech, the daughter of the king, She'eles with Bas Kohen Gadol, she borrows from the Kohen Gadol. Now the king is higher, the high priest is a level below. She's going to borrow from someone lower because there's no choice. There's only one king. But this is how it goes. Continues. I'm sorry, but no, I'm sorry. Borrowing lower, that's the model. The Bavli is borrowing lower. So this is simple. So the daughter of the king, retract that, is borrowing from the daughter of the Kohen Gadol, and then Bas Kohen Gadol, the daughter of the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, borrows from a level, a rank below her. Bas Gan from the daughter of the vice Kohen Gadol. Bas Gan and the daughter of the vice Kohen Gadol, Bas Meshuach Muhammad. She borrows from a Kohen who was only appointed when the Jews went out to war, and he addressed the people. It's called the anointed for war. So he's one rank below the vice Kohen Gadol. Bas Meshuach Milchama, and the daughter of the Kohen who was appointed in times of war, she borrows from the Kohen lower. The Bas Kohen had an ordinary Kohen. All right, so what do we see? Each one is borrowing from the level below. Simple. Yeah. So say that She'ela, the borrowing is Shekol Acha She'eles, each one borrows Mizu Shalamatim Imena from a girl who is on a lower level in the hierarchy of the priesthood and so on. As he says, the king precedes in rank the Kohen Gadol, and he brings sources for that. Kohen Gadol Misgan, the high priest is higher than the vice, the secondary Kohen Gadol, and so on. That's the opinion of the Babel. However,
So it's based on like the Levite class, not like wealth class? Based on like the Levite class?
This is the Kohen class.
Right.
Now, in the Levites, there's no level, so there's no choice. So
Right.
But where there are levels, you borrow lower. So a Levite will borrow from a Yisrael.
Right.
Now, within the Israelites themselves, the truth is there are also, the tribe of Yehuda are leaders. The Gemara doesn't continue, but conceivably there too, to whatever degree, you are borrowing from a station, a level lower. But it's most marked in the priesthood.
And it's not to do with wealth class.
This is not wealth. This is not wealth. This is spiritual class. Yeah. That's the opinion of the Bavli. But the view of the Jerusalem Talmud is the other way. You borrow up. The daughter of the king, She'elis and Kohen Gadol, she borrows from the Kohen Gadol. Now the Kohen Gadol is lower, but there's no choice. So she's got to borrow. She's only the borrows lower. But look at the rest of it. Kohen Gadol, but the daughter of the high priest, She'elis and She'elis, she borrows up from the white clothing from the daughter of the king, and so on. So we see from the Rebbe says, the fact that the Rishonim says clearly that the daughter of the Kohen Gadol borrows from the daughter of the king, Mochach, perforce, we conclude, it doesn't go further, it just gives us the pattern. We can then deduce that the Rishonim is Ugamba Basgan, as you go down, everybody is borrowing from one higher. Each one borrows from a level higher. It's only in brackets. It's only the princess, the daughter of the king, that the Rishonim agree to the Babli. There's no other way. She's got to borrow down. There's nobody higher than the king. But everybody else borrows up. Finished. That's an argument, a practical argument between the Bavli and the Rishon, Babylonian Talmud, Jerusalem Talmud, who what? Borrows from who? Babylonian Talmud is borrowed down. Yerushalmi is you borrow up. Now, it would appear that the position of the Babylon is not understood, the Babylonian Talmud. You have a choice. Why borrow down when you can borrow up? And you'll get, you're coming with finer clothes, at least spiritually. Why is she borrowing the white clothing in order to be beautiful? We keep it white. Simple reason is to keep it uniform, equal. But at the same time, it's beautiful. She's borrowing white clothing. White is beautiful. And she wants to look her best. So why not borrow up? You have a choice. Shayofi maybe beauty surely brings up by the natural law as an isoya, the desirability, increases desirability in marriage. It should have been that each one should borrow from the one above. Now, certainly spiritually, that's true. We explain spiritually, the white is you're drawing from a higher level. You're drawing from a higher level. You were going beyond my conscious color, right? Mind and intellect. So the Rishonim makes sense. You're borrowing up, as we explained before, spiritually. The whole marriage is you've got to draw on the soul essence, Yechida, that's high at the conscious, ego, color, mind, and heart level. So for sure, we should be borrowing up. Why does the Babli say you borrow down? So first we'll answer on a halachic level, then spiritual. Follow the question? Yeah. Yesh levaya tam shedis Babli. Can explain now the position of the Babli. Everybody's following. Yeah, good. It's beautiful. Yeah. What was that? Okay. The position of the Bavli. Why does the Babylonian Talmud say you borrow down and not up? Because when you borrow from someone above, first I'm going to explain it at a very simple level. Nigla, halacha, and then dig. First nigla. It's embarrassing. It's an element involvement when you have to borrow something from somebody else that they have and you don't. So it's humbling, it's embarrassing. Because you're just a receiver, not a giver. So you want to be a giver. If you're receiving, at least compensate with giving. You're saying a very nice thank you, but you're getting much more than you're giving. So there's an element of embarrassment. Masha Enke, listen to the beautiful insight here on a very halachic level. We're going to finish in a few minutes. You have to go downstairs, yeah? What?
We have to get ready on time.
Okay, so you go, you'll listen to the tape. But when you borrow someone who's lower, even though you're borrowing, you're also receiving, but you're also giving. The one that you're borrowing for is also a receiver. Why? The benefit that this person is wearing the clothing of someone higher. I'm sorry, that you're asking. When you borrow from somebody lower, can I have what you have? You're giving them something. Wow, I'm giving my clothing to them. It's not an embarrassing thing when you borrow from someone lesser, because you're giving them the status, the prestige, the honor, the good feeling that I gave the king's daughter, I gave the, whatever the next level. They borrowed from me. So as much as you borrowed, you also gave. That's not an embarrassment. So which one is it, the embarrassing one? The Yerushalmi is embarrassing. Yerushalmi is saying you borrow up. The Babli is not embarrassing. By borrowing down, you're giving. They feel great and wonderful that they lent someone of a higher station. So therefore, here is the dispute here. Let's read it inside. Second last line. So even though the purpose of marriage, on the one hand, you want to go with the best clothing, you borrow up. You'd want to have more beautiful, means spiritually even more beautiful clothing. And the embarrassment when you borrow. Next page, it's only for a moment. And it's incomparable to us to the benefit that of the match who's you're getting married forever, and you're going to go out there wearing better clothing. It's worth a temporary embarrassment. That's what Rishalmi says. But the Bible says no. That Lonian Talmud says it's certainly embarrassing now. That's a certainty. And to tell us, are you going to find your soulmate? No guarantee. The benefit is besafek, is doubt. And when is it going to be? And it's later. So the Bible says we don't compromise the present moment for a possible gain later. The Yerushalmi says yes. That's you just explained now. This is the two views. The Yerushalmi says compromise now for a later gain. It's worth it. And therefore borrow up. Babli says, don't know what's going to be the next minute. And we can't guarantee. And so now is now. All we know is the present. So Babli says, every moment you got to do right now in the best possible way. So don't borrow. Don't borrow up, borrow down. That's the basic halachic dispute between the Babli and the Rishalmi. Now we'll explain next week the spiritual dimension. And God willing, next week we'll tie it into a fascinating other dispute that's rooted in the Babli Rishalmi. It has to do with going to war, King David, that you're a fascinating story, where the same principles are operating, the two views here. Namely, do we compromise the present moment because we can see clearly the outcome right now and it's worth it, there'll be a bigger gain later, or no, we don't assume that we can see the outcome, and we don't. So the question is, who can see, who can't see? When should you compromise, when shouldn't you? It's a big question in life, and we'll see. We're already running out of time, so we'll see, God willing, we'll revisit all of this next week. Okay, friends, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you all at, well, some of you, all of you maybe at 10:15 for the Modchei Dov and Pesach Halevi Shir. Have a great day.
Thank you.